Well, welcome back to a new video working on the Triumph Roadster. Today I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get something more out of the master cylinder. I've taken it apart once again and I've fitted a larger O-ring to it, which should hopefully stop the air getting in that gap in the two castings of the cylinder. So I'm going to refit that and give it another try. I've also got a length of tubing which I hope will allow the fluid to sit higher up and give it a better head of pressure. Then finally I'll be looking at the headlamps and we'll see how far we can get with those. Certainly now that we've cleared the wasp's nest out of the steering column boss, that should be a great improvement. So what are we waiting for? Let's get going now. So I've put the master cylinder back in loosely. I haven't reconnected the pipes yet. I'll do that in a second. But I wanted to show you my tube. I have this tube which obviously has the wrong thread on it. I'm not going to use that end, it's a bit damaged. I'll use this end. The thread is of course wrong, but it does just go in and it stays in, which is the main thing. I'm obviously going to be very gentle when I wind it. Ideally I wanted a plastic one, but I couldn't find a plastic one which would actually go in, which was annoying. They were all too large or too small. So that will hopefully go in like that. Something along those lines. I'm going to wrap some plumber's tape around it, and then that should give a greater volume of fluid in the master cylinder rather than a tiny reservoir that lives on the cylinder itself. And then when the brakes have bled, haha, that'll be the day, I'll be able to drain the fluid out of this bit and just put the cap on as per normal. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully this should provide a bit more pressure actually on there, and that might help it sort of seal and keep the air out a bit more, I don't know. But other people have recommended that I try this, and certainly it seems to work for other people, so why not give it a go? It didn't cost very much, so worth a try. Press. Release. Press. Release. Press. Release. There's still air coming through. Press. Release. Well, welcome back once again to a new video on the Triumph Roadster. Today we'll be continuing with the things we started working on last time. I'm hopeful that we might make some progress with the headlamps, and I'll be trying a few new methods on the brakes. I think that I'll try gravity bleeding it first, and if not we might have to try pressurising the master cylinder. So we'll be working out some way to fit the cap with a system of creating a bit of back pressure to then force the fluid through the lines and hopefully not introduce any air into the system, because I think whenever we press the pedal it's somehow bringing air in and it's even bubbling up in the master cylinder. So that's something which needs to be addressed. But I've brought some clamps along. These are just normal clampy things, and I'm going to try and fix them to the flexi-hoses and thereby separate the rear system from the front, and that may also allow us to work out where the trouble is. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Well, I'm now pleased to report that the master cylinder is all back together, and that's because I think I may have solved the problem with the brakes. This issue, which has been plaguing me for the past year or more, has suddenly been solved rather anticlimactically, but I'll explain how. I will just demonstrate that if I lean in the car and push on the pedal, you will see that's quite firm. There is about an inch of free pressure in it, which is pretty much what the manual specifies. So what I did was I had a number of clamps, 3, which I brought round. So they were just, you know, building clamps, clamping things. They weren't anything special. And I put I first did the two at the front. I put the clamp on the flexi-hoses and just prevented fluid flowing there. And then I topped up the master cylinder. I didn't actually use my fluid extension pressure thing this time. I couldn't get it to seal very well. It didn't have the right thread, despite my attempts to make it seal, but I couldn't get it to work. You may have a better solution if you can find one with the right thread for the master cylinder. And then I went round to the rear, and at the rear I just had my tube on here with the bottle at the end, and I released the bleed nipple and I waited for the fluid to flow and the bubbles to come out. The bubbles came out and they popped at the top, and then I waited for it to get about maybe 4 or 5 inches up into the tube. It just gradually went up there over the course of about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I closed the nipple and I took it off just to make sure that no air could get in. And then I went back round to the cylinder and I topped it off because the level had gone down. And then I went round to the other rear side, rear driver's side I should say, and you can see here I've still got my system. So I had that on the bleed nipple, which is there, yes, that one, and I cracked it off, and then I did the same thing. I had the fluid going out, and then I waited until it got a few inches up, and then I closed it and released the fluid into the bottle. Then I went back to the pedal and I pressed the pedal, and to my surprise it was actually somewhat firm. So I thought, well, maybe these gurus actually are onto something. And then I first I put the clamp on the rear one. So I clamped off the rear flexi hose under the car. That one right up there. You can just see it with the brass T-junction at the end. And I then released the two at the front, which were on the front flexi hoses, and then I bled the passenger side front and the driver's side front in the same way. And to my great surprise, we now have a firm pedal. So unfortunately I didn't even think of filming it because I'd spent so long trying to mend this that to film it all would have taken hours and would have bored you all to death. So that seems to be fixed, but I'm going to wait, and if it holds pressure then that's very good. If it doesn't, then we may need to work out more, but it's still very strange and we can't quite work out what's going on. It's very difficult to work out how this master cylinder works. It's not like anything I've ever seen before, and even when we were pressing the pedal before, there was air coming up inside the reservoir itself, which is most unusual, and there was something very odd about it. So I don't know if it sort of miraculously fixed itself, but other people have difficulty with Roadster brakes too, so I'm not the only one, but it's very unexpected. Anyway, I'm going to get on with mending the headlamps, which I have started, and we'll see what happens over the course of the next few days and months. Alright, so I'm now once again upside down under the dashboard, enjoying the ambiance down here, as I seem to do frequently these days. But I thought I'd look firstly at the ignition switch, which of course controls the lights, and I turn it. It doesn't show anything, but I don't know if it's significant that there's nothing connected to that final pin. So that's something to investigate. I'll compare that to the diagram in the manual and things. And then I don't know where all these wires go, because they'll be the ones for the lights, because they're larger. I wonder if you can see anything up there. I don't know what that connector is. That's significant. That seems to be connected. Does that run? These ones here. Oops. I don't know how far you can see. There are these ones, and then they run into. Oh, that looks undesirable. There's a loose wire, and then this bit's held together with a fairly recent bit of electrical tape. God, that looks most peculiar. Well, I wonder if I trace this before I reconnect it. That might be... Oh, it just runs straight into the loom. Ah, and there's a mosquito attacking my face. Yes, so I think ow, that's a number plate. This wire here runs into the loom, but I wonder if I could check continuity and see if that, where do these ones go? So that one goes, oh, they all run into the loom. So maybe it is worth trying to connect that and just seeing if the lights come on. I'll give that a go. Well, here's an update. I've extracted those 3 wires, and it appears that 2 of them, the outer 2, receive 12 volts when the lights are turned on. I just tested it with the multimeter. The middle one receives nothing. So the question is the middle one the one for the lights? Now, I've been working on this junction box for quite a while. Someone at some point seems to have rewired the car with all these black wires, so you have no idea where any of them go, and they all go into this long black mess which runs down there. Inside, going off the original diagram, I worked that number 14, which is this one here at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock on the clock face, that one should be the headlamps. That's called number 14. And this one down here at 6 o'clock is labelled number 2 on the diagram, and that should be for the fog lamps. Someone had wired up the headlamps at the ignition switch to 6 o'clock, which should be the fog lamps, as the headlamps, which isn't correct. So I've fixed that, and the wire which was just left loose under the dashboard is now going to 2 o'clock, which should be the headlamps. But then I thought, well, I'll trace where the 6 o'clock one went, because that was odd, and I was sort of pulling at it and thinking, this is very annoying, and then I was sort of wiggling it, and I start wiggling it, and I was wiggling it, and then I thought, what's that strange thing waving at me down there? And I looked a bit closer, and this has been eaten. And if we look even closer, you can see both ends have been gnawed and a section removed. So I don't know if that's rat or human, but I'm very tempted to reconnect those and see if anything happens. I might just do that now. So first I tried using this jump lead to join the 2 broken ends down the bottom, which didn't do anything, and now I've tried joining this end of the lead up to one at 2 o'clock, which is point 14 on the diagram. If I do that, you can see that at the front there's absolutely no change whatsoever. Okay. I've been pulling the chewed up wire out, and I've pulled it out, and I've worked out that it goes to the white Lucar connection, which then runs up inside the steering column. So I've then got the crock clip onto it, the other end of which is attached to the multimeter. Thank you, cockatoo. And then this end I touch to the point on the, you can't see it very well, sorry, on the dipper switch, which is on the steering column. I just pulled the bobble out, so I touch it there, and there is a dead short. So that's released, and that's that. So there should be 12 volts to that. I don't know why. So I'll try it again with 12 volts to it, and then I'll measure that the 12 volts is getting up here, because this is the important part, I think. So the crock clip is now fixed to point 14, which I rewired to the headlamp switch on the ignition key. So then if I turn it on, we can stop. Oh my goodness. I think, all right, that's a great improvement. That's dip. Yes, it's pretty dim, so I assume it's dip. It could be full, of course. But now, if I flick that, oh, full dip, or dip. Oh my goodness. we fixed it. Or I fixed it. It was that one wire. But why didn't it work before? Oh, that's amazing. After all that time. Alright, well, I think after all that effort and success with the brakes, I've earned a nice cup of tea. Yeah, so it looks like this white wire here was the culprit all along, but before you remind me, I am going to tighten this up because I forgot to do that before. So I'll retighten the steering column. That should do it. Good. There we are. So I hope you've enjoyed this strangely successful episode of the Triumph Roadster restoration. It seems most peculiar that one can continue working on a car for years on end with seemingly minimal success, and then you come along one day with a few fresh ideas and lo and behold it all goes to plan. But I only wish every episode were quite this easy. Otherwise, I will say I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next episode, which will hopefully be very soon, where we'll be putting new tyres on and maybe even taking it out of the garage for the first time under its own steam, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, I will say thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and ta-ta for now.